Since 2022, we all hear that recession is coming. Many say that it can even be worse than the 2008 crisis. But here's the interesting thing. One of the primary indicators of a recession is a high unemployment rate, and we see nothing like this at the moment. In fact, now, the unemployment rate is almost at an all-time low at 3.8%. What does it mean then? I looked into the question, and even reputable sources like this article from the Washington Post weren't given any direct answers. Their main message is that the situation is puzzling. Well, it might be a good word to describe what's happening, but it creates more questions than answers. That's why today we'll see what's actually happening and how you can protect yourself in this situation. We all remember how, at some point in 2022, companies started to lay people off massively. It was mostly happening in the tech sector. Over 1,000 technology-related companies reduced their staff. Twitter, now X, Amazon, Meta, you name it. Tens of thousands of Americans lost their jobs.
Meta Platforms is laying off 13% of its workforce, or more than 11,000 employees.
3,700 workers being told, yeah, we don't need your services anymore.
And this tendency also continued this year, with over 100,000 people losing their jobs.
More layoffs at Amazon, 18,000 jobs.
The tech field isn't the only area struggling with layoffs. The real estate and banking sector also saw big job cuts. I don't know about you, but it's hard to believe that the unemployment rate could be low with such massive layoffs. How is it possible? First of all, according to surveys, most people manage to find a new job in a month or two after being laid off, and 80% of them didn't have pay cuts. But it isn't just that. The number of job openings is still high. Of course, on the news, you can hear that there was a drop from 12 million new job postings in March 2022 to over 9.6 million in August 2023. Yet, if we look at it from a different perspective, it is still almost 40% higher than the pre-pandemic era. Plus, we can barely take 2021 and early 2022 as a reference due to the gigantic government stimulus with massive money printing and the reduction of interest rates to almost zero by the Federal Reserve. It is just impossible for the economy to work this way in the long run. Despite the fact that the job market is in relatively good condition, many Americans still have to either get a second job or a side hustle. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 325,000 people have 2 full-time jobs. Another 4.4 million have a full-time job along with a part-time one, while nearly 2 million are managing multiple part-time jobs.
With inflation still high, a large number of Americans are taking on multiple full-time jobs at the same time.
Generally, 7.8 million Americans, or 5% of those employed, have more than one job. Even though it seems like we could blame the current situation, the truth is that this rate has remained stable since the Great Recession. It's even lower than in the mid-1990s, for example. Still, it is hard to say if this data is completely accurate because it is complicated to measure. That's why some economy experts say that the number of Americans with several jobs is at least twice as high, and it could be reaching 16 million, which is 10% of the US workforce. Is this a sign of something bigger? It could be, because there's a very important connection between the recession and unemployment. Basically, we all hear that the Fed increases interest rates to fight inflation, and high inflation is one of the factors that can lead to a recession. The only issue is that the levels of inflation directly influences the labor market. Did you know that the higher the unemployment, the lower the inflation rate? It also works the other way around. The more people are employed, the higher the inflation rate. So basically, inflation and unemployment move in opposite directions. But it's not that simple. How does it work then? Well, it all comes down to supply and demand. When more people are employed, there is more money in the economy. They spend more, and there's a higher demand for everything, which can lead to a deficit when prices rise. That's what we've seen happening in the real estate market with its crazy prices. But there's more to it. When there are many job openings, there are fewer people looking for employment than companies wanting to hire someone. That's why businesses have to fight for the candidates, often by offering higher wages. Why does it matter? Well, because when wages go up, companies tend to charge more for their goods and services to cover their salaries expenses, and this causes higher inflation. So if the Fed's main goal for now is to lower inflation, would it also mean the unemployment rate can increase? Yes. There's actually a small paradox in this situation because the Federal Reserve has a main mission to guarantee two things: maximum employment and price stability, meaning an adequate level of inflation. But because employment and inflation are so connected, it is hard to achieve. That's why the Fed has to balance between what they call optimal employment and inflation rates. And by the way, when we say maximum employment, in reality, it doesn't mean having every American working. This refers to employing the most people without causing too much inflation. It's like having almost everyone who wants to work without overheating the economy. So now, the Fed is trying to stabilize the situation and reduce inflation. They mainly do it by adjusting the interest rates. When rates drop, borrowing gets cheaper and people and companies spend more, and more job openings appear. But it can also lead to higher prices if demand is too big. Inflation, it's a complicated process that isn't easy to control. It's like a speedometer for rising prices in our daily lives, affecting everything from food to vehicles. What it does is basically eat our money. So if inflation is at 3% and John has $10,000 in cash in savings, his money will be worth $9,700 in just a year. And if Sarah, for example, invests in bonds that give her 5% return, she will only get 2% back because of the inflation. But she will preserve the value of her money, plus earn a little extra. So this is a good scenario. The inflation rate in the US at the time of this episode recording is actually a bit higher than that, at 3.7%. As you can see, the Fed managed to lower it from the 8.2% we saw last year. Still, the Federal Reserve targets its 2% goal. There's still some work to do, and no one knows if it will be easy because the inflation could stick for longer. But where does it come from in the first place? There are different types of inflation. The first one is the cost-push inflation. It occurs when the prices increase because the production cost grows. For example, you might not care about the copper price, but if it goes up, the gadgets can get more expensive because they have components that contain copper. Apart from this, there is another reason for inflation: rising wages. When people expect price increases, they ask for higher salaries to deal with the new expenses. It's like a cycle where increased wages and prices keep chasing each other. That's why it's often referred to as the built-in inflation. The next cause is monetary devaluation. In this case, inflation happens when there's too much cash and not enough things to buy. More money means each dollar is worth less, so your buying power decreases while the prices naturally go up. Finally, there's demand pull inflation. When prices rise because everyone wants particular products or services, and strong demand leads to higher prices. This usually happens when unemployment is low and wages are high, as consumers feel confident to spend more. When everyone is after the same thing, supply shrinks and prices go up. This is the law of supply and demand in action. Because of the many different reasons inflation increases, central banks, like the Fed, focus on stabilizing prices, and whether they want it or not, the labor market is affected. This happens because of several monetary policy decisions. For example, when the Federal Reserve changes the interest rates, it regulates many different aspects of the economy. As the rates climb, borrowing becomes more expensive for both businesses and people. This reduces company spending, investment, and hiring, slowing down the job market growth. And things can also happen the other way around, meaning lower rates stimulate the labor market. Also, the Fed affects financial stability. The regulatory and supervisory functions of the Federal Reserve help ensure the working financial system. This indirectly contributes to a stable labor market because any crisis causes job losses and economic turbulence. Apart from that, the Fed influences exchange rates. Its monetary policy decisions impact the value of the US dollar relative to other currencies. Fluctuations in exchange rates impact international trade and the competitiveness of US industries. And this is what influences employment, especially in sectors that depend on exports. So there is a strong connection between the Fed's action and unemployment. But does it mean that if the Federal Reserve continues to increase the rates, more people will lose their jobs? To answer that, we have to understand why the layoffs started in the first place. Of course, inflation was one of the major factors because it increased costs for companies. So they had to cut their spending, and the most common way to do it is by firing people. But the truth is that something like this can happen at any time, no matter how the economy is doing. And for now, we've seen that there's still many job offers on the market. So the situation doesn't seem to be too dramatic. Another major reason why we saw the layoffs was simply because the market was too overheated and many companies overhired. Most tech firms expanded during the online boom of COVID-19, but now they're downsizing. There was a very high demand for everything and anything digital, so businesses went all in. For example, Meta almost doubled its workforce back then. But as people returned to in-person shopping, traveling, and dining, the demand for tech services declined, leading to layoffs. Besides, the loans are now much more expensive compared to the almost free money during the pandemic. That's why companies have to be more thoughtful with how they spend their money. For now, most financial experts aren't even sure if we will enter into a recession or manage to have the safe landing the Fed expects. And the truth is that it doesn't matter too much because in the end, the economy has its cycle and recessions are unavoidable. In this video, I explain why it is like that, so make sure to check it out to better understand the current situation. I know it might seem like the worst is coming, especially when reading all the news, but in reality, this is the time for our economy to recharge and start fresh. And all of us have already managed to overcome banking and housing crisis, the pandemic, several recessions, and high inflation. This will be just another step. But to go through this time smoothly, try using the following mentality. As much as you can, try to pay off your debt, especially the high interest ones. You can find many videos to help you with this in our channel. The next crucial step is to not spend money on things that don't bring you value. But if you are spending money on becoming a better professional or learning something valuable, you can create an added advantage. And this can help you even if the economy slows down further. If you are investing, make sure that your portfolio is diversified because even if a crisis is coming, you never know what can happen. So having your money spread among different assets is the general recommendation for everyone. And always stay informed without focusing too much on the negativity because in the end, you and I cannot control the ups and downs of the economy. For now, let's see if the Fed achieves the soft landing because this will be the single most defining factor for the future of the labor market. Share this episode with your friends and relatives to keep them informed. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.